Well, you know what? Sometimes it's a little different just on the schedule because you're coming in on back-to-back, so you don't spend the day where you connect with friends and family. You spend, for certain guys, if they spend a long time there, they have deep roots in the community and they have a lot of people to reach out. You always wonder about the distractions on those kind of days. It's kind of like Christmas time for them. And then we're just in and out here today, so I don't imagine he's spent a whole lot of time saying his hellos. But it's always significant for the player, especially I think when they come back to the team that they started at, when it's their roots. So they broke into the league and won some big games here. He was such a great performer here, and a controversial performer at times too. So it'll be interesting to see tonight. I think you know, he's the more involved in a game he is, the more productive he is. I think he'll be fired up tonight, but kind of find he is every night. So I don't know that I'll notice much of a difference from the bench because that's the game he plays.
Coach, we all know what a good player Matthew is. How much have you enjoyed getting to know Matthew, the person, these last couple months?
So that's the thing. I mean, you coach against teams and players, and you have a perception. You assume the personality on the ice is the personality off, and he's just been wonderful to watch. He's so good to the support staff, the trainers. I mean, everybody, bus drivers, security guards. I mean, he was there less than a week and had taken all the trainers out for dinner. So he's just I think part of that, he grew up in the hockey life. There's lots of stories of his father doing very, very kind private things for a lot of people that needed help, and so he learned that, and he's been wonderful to watch with his teammates and the people around the Florida community.
You kind of described his off-ice personality. How would you describe his on-ice?
Well, what's new? I mean, he's a competitive man. He is in the game, wants to win, wants to compete. I didn't fully appreciate his hands. I knew he had good hands. He's a good player. He puts it, but you almost got to see him in practice sometimes, because there's more pucks that go to net in practice, and you get to see more reps of what he can do in small areas under pressure, in behind that net to the net front. Small plays off the walls. I didn't have a full understanding of how skilled this guy is. I mean, he's an incredibly skilled player. That would be the biggest surprise from the off-ice. The on-ice, I didn't appreciate his hands.
It seems like Matthew's really adjusted well. There's new surroundings, there's new team. You've seen a lot of players change teams, and some adjust well, some take a while. What do you think's lending itself to Matthew adjusting so quickly to this new situation?
Matthew has played with a number of different center icemen here and produced with all of them, and his game never changed. I don't want to say he plays. I mean, he can play off people is probably the best way to put that. When he plays with Barkov, it is a slightly different game. There's a lot more short area give and go plays. When he plays with Sam Bennett, it's more of a straight line game, kind of north south pucks driven to the net. So he has the ability to adapt his game without actually changing it, if that makes sense. He can play off the nuances of other players very, very well.
In your experience, is that like a rare trait for players?
You know what? I would say yes at the age. When you get an older player, Ron Francis would be an older player that came in that was so critical to our team in Carolina. It took him from being real bad to being real good in about a year. He could change his game with people around him, but younger players normally are still learning their game. They're still learning the NHL game. There's a lot for them to process. He seems to have picked up on that very, very quickly.
Matthew is sort of a unicorn in the league with his power forward. He has skill. As a coach, when you have that guy on your roster or on your bench during a game, just how does that change your life in terms of matchups?
Well, that's the key. And you won't see it as much tonight with Sasha Barkov out of our lineup, but you can move him to one line and change what that line does. So especially on the road when you'll see versions of either skilled lines played against Barkov or Bennett or checking lines play against them. You can move them away from Barkov, and now they have to make another decision on who they're going to try to shut down. He's our leading scorer. You got Barkov on the other line. It causes some problems for the home team, I think, in our matchups, but style of play as well. I mean, he'll get to guys. He'll get to defensemen. He'll get to net front, and that has to be matched, I think.
Coach, on that, any updates on Sasha the last couple days?
Feeling better today, which is the first kind of positive news that we got. So we hope he's on the mend here now. And I don't have a timeline for you, but we are more confident and feeling better about where he's at than we were yesterday.
It's interesting that with Matthew, yes, he gets to play against his teammates tonight at home in Calgary, but it's like the second time he gets to play against those guys in a matter of like 2 weeks. Can you think of another situation of guys you've turn around that quick?
I mean, I don't think so, so that tells me it's not that big a deal. You know, I do like, it's tough with the Western Conference, obviously. I do like those close games together. I love, the only good part of the COVID divisions where that you would play the same team 2 or 3 times, I think it made the games way better. More fun for the coaches anyway. You're changing stuff, you're changing your matchup, you feel like some days you're just, you know, it's the next game, new team, and you move on. So I don't remember or recall that being like a home and home. So I mean, I don't think it's a factor, other than the fact that when we get off this trip, we're not going back to the West Coast this year. So it's nice to have that travel off our schedule.
Now you have a back-to-back, always a challenge. What must be the most important key in terms of dictating the style of play this game?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll dictate style of play, but getting to our game is really important, being true to that game. I think in back-to-back games, I don't think you see the team dominate very often. It's a statistical truth that you're challenged. For us, that's got nothing to do with it, the back-to-back. I mean, Matthew played 23. I didn't have anybody over 20 minutes. They're fine. You know, we're healthy, so they're fine. The challenge is you know, what we've been through. So we beat Boston. We had a nice run on St. Louis and lost that game in overtime and had a lead and lost it late. That's the challenge, right? 2 things, finding the courage to get up and shake those off so you can go and give yourself the best chance, being a driver in the game, not carrying that game with you, at the same time using all the energy that comes with it. Smart hockey is always critical on back-to-back. You've got to stay out of the penalty box, and you've got to manage the puck right, because that other team is going to have more jump than you will, so you've got to be smart about where you put it deep, how you put it deep, those kind of things. We'll talk a little bit about that. The discipline's been, I mean, we're a high-event team right now. We take a lot of penalties. We get a lot of power plays, so I think that's trending in the proper direction. But just managing the emotions of the game, but finding some emotion for the game. That I'm not worried about calming them down. I got to find a way to pump those tires tonight.
Who do you have in net tonight, Coach?
Bob's going tonight.
Well, I know you weren't there with, you know, with Uberdo last year and without Matthew Tkachuk in your lineup, but I'm sure you've done plenty of homework before taking that job. What do you think he brings to this team that this team didn't have, now that you've seen him play for quarters?
We're talking about
Matthew, what do you think he brings to?
I think he brings a game that he can play in the regular season, he can play in the playoffs. His game isn't going to change. There's some bite to it. The heavier those games get, and you know what they're like in the playoffs, they get very, very heavy. He'll still produce. He'll still get to the hard areas. His game won't have to change. So there's a consistency there that we're trying to build into our program here, where it's not as much of a flow game and a chance trade game. We're trying to spread that delta on our expected goals, get our defensive game better, drive more play to the net. His style of play will allow that to happen, we feel.
And how does a coach change the style of play? Is it details? Is it where forwards are in the neutral zone? Like, how are you trying to change this team so that they do have that success come this springtime?
We spent an awful lot of time not trying to change our offensive game. We've got them to shoot pucks a bit more, because that's a concept of playoff. I mean, everything that we talk about now is building a game that you can play in the playoffs and have success with it. There is a grind to it. We got lots of work to do with it, but for the most part, we've driven our offensive game to the right areas. We generate enough to win games. We have shut down the slot in our end of the ice, which was a real problem for us last year. Being able to close those slot areas off, we've been much, much better at it. We're top three or four in almost all of those slot area categories. And that's a process. So it is a harder game that we're trying to play. It is a bit more of a grind. Might be slightly less fun at times, but it'll get fun soon.
Sorry, you mentioned Matthew Tkachuk in his game in the playoffs. You saw him up close in the playoffs a couple of years ago. How much
Yes,
did he
I
sort of
did.
drive you nuts in that series?
I'm well past being clinically insane, so I was already there. There's just sometimes you just look at a guy like that as a coach, and you do. I mean, God, I wish I had that guy. Right? Like when you're tailoring your game plan, and there's 2 or 3 players on the team that you have to watch for because of style of play. And I'm not even talking about the aggressiveness, what they can do around your net. You got to get the right matchup. Those guys are hard to find. That they're not just players, they're specific players, they're unique players, they're hard to find. And they're really important to a team. To be able to have a texture is not the right word. You got to have different styles of game. You got to have speed, you got to have skill, but you got to have some bite in your game. And he brings that for sure.
Thank you. Thanks
Okay,
very much.
guys.